This is another Edexcel A-Level English Literature video, and we're going to be revising The Wife of Bath. I've got lots of context points from the Middle Ages, and I've also got a lot of quotes. Geoffrey Chaucer was an English author and poet renowned for his work in the Canterbury Tales. He is widely recognised as the finest English poet of the Middle Ages and has been referred to as the father of English literature. Chaucer worked as a bureaucrat, courtier, diplomat and member of the Parliament, in addition to producing famous works such as The Legend of Good Women, Troilus and the Book of Duchess. He is recognised for establishing the literary adoption of Middle English, while Latin and French were still the main languages in England. Thus his poetry determined the future of English literature. Chaucer became the first writer buried in the Poets' Corner at Westminster Abbey. When Chaucer was only 12 years old, he was abducted by an aunt who wanted to marry him off to her daughter in order to maintain land in Ipswich. The aunt was sentenced to prison and fined £250, which today would be £200,000, implying that his family was very affluent. In the late 1300s and early 1400s, men would study astrology, arithmetic, geography, and music, forming the quadrivium. Astrology was also treated as a science. Chaucer wrote a book for his son called the Treatise on the Astrolabe, and that was about astrology. Chaucer is believed to have begun the Canterbury Tales in the 1380s, but never completed them. They consist of 24 stories totaling about 17,000 lines that are written in Middle English, primarily in verse but some prose. The stories portray an iconic portrayal of the English society and the church during the time. While Chaucer appears to have appreciated Christians and was himself one, he also knew that countless people in the church were corrupt. The Canterbury Tales are also frequently seen as an origin of the English vernacular tradition, rather than Latin, French, or Italian. English, on the other hand, has been utilised as a literary language for years before Chaucer's period. The Canterbury Tales begins a storytelling contest to pass the time by a party of pilgrims travelling from London to Canterbury to see St Thomas Becket's shrine at Canterbury Cathedral. The winner of this competition will get a complimentary meal at the Tabard Inn in Southwark upon their return. And Chaucer's work has a lot of anti-clerical ideas within it. During the Great Western Schism in 1378, writers became more critical of the church and its religious festivals. They criticised the church and its clerical members by their presentation of venal, immoral, irreligious, corrupted nature of pilgrimage or religious ceremonies, presentation of corrupt, immoral, venal clergy and estate satire, and the presentation of the argument that biblical texts should be open to an individual's readings and interpretations, yet they were the translators, and that links to the argument of the Lollard movement. Pilgrimages were actually seen as a very sexual thing, and people went there for immoral reasons, not actually to find their religion. According to the estate satire, conventional features of anti-feminist portrayal of the wife include multiple pilgrimages to show their sexuality, concern about precedents in the church, weaving or spinning, knowledge of the law of love, pride and vanity, and promiscuity. Other details which would be recognised by a medieval audience would be wearing red, hip size, and teeth, and this is all mentioned in the Wife of Bath's prologue. How she's wearing red, she has stockings, she's got a gap between her teeth, and wide hips. During the 14th century, anti-religious movements increased. They translated the Bible into English. There was a Bible in every home, the democratization of religious doctrine. So they made the Bible accessible to everybody. Women became preachers, and they were against the established church, its rituals and ceremonies. Chaucer portrays the pardoner as callous, immoral, and decadent. Partners offered indulgences or previously written pardons for their particular sins to people who repented of the sin that they had committed. Along with receiving the indulgence, the penitent would make a donation to the church by giving money to the pardoner. The things that pardoners generally did were prohibited. They were not actually supposed to sell indulgences, preach in churches, or forgive sins, and they weren't supposed to collect money for displaying relics. Officially, all they could do was deliver the paperwork of an indulgence from the Pope or a bishop to a repentant sinner. They were represented as figures of dubious moral probity. Okay. Summoners summon sinners to the church court and work in collusion with pardoners, even though they should be indicting the pardoner. They were a minor official who acquired inquisitorial powers in cases that could incur excommunication, such as non-payment of tithes, hearsay, usury, slander, and witchcraft. Summoners were condemned for extortion in the Council of London by Parliament and by writers including Chaucer in the Canterbury Tales. Rivalry of summoners and friars is a key trope of anti-clericalism, as each was in competition to extort the same money from the poor in each parish. The presentation of the wife leans heavily on the character of Lavier from Romance of the Rose by Jean de Meun. The character is an old prostitute, and she tells a confessio explaining how to outwit men. She's a stock character, and this is a character that's recognisable across many narratives. So, for example, you've got kings and queens, and maybe a clown acting as comic relief. But in this particular story, this is the character of wisdom. She also contains many of the same estate satires as the wife. The differentiation is significant. The original story lays out an allegory of courtly love, dealing with the narrator's efforts to win over his fair lady. Jean de Meun took this framework and constructed it upon a more expansive examination of love. Jean retells this story, introducing characters such as the jealous husband and elaborating others such as Lavier. Jean also intersperses a number of discursive digressions. First, reason dissuades the lover from his quest. Then the friend alternatively advises and distracts him. Finally, the lover is aided by the love of God, the God of love, who gathers his forces to attack the fortress where jealousy holds Bel-Acuel. Upon the initial defeat of his army, love calls on his mother, Venus, for help, and nature and genius confess and sermonize, respectively. Venus leads the new successful assault, allowing the young man to seize the rose, after which he awakens from his dream. Arthurian romances or courtly love stories have the following characteristics: a idealized and distant setting, presentation of courts and forests, ideation of adultery and conventional characters, a conventional plot, and the quality of gentilesse and stock characters. And of course, pretty much all of these are present in The Wife of Bath. There are two meanings of gentilesse: a moral code or an aristocratic birth. In the Canterbury Tales, Chaucer explores an issue which was hotly debated at the time. It's necessary to be of genteel birth in order to possess the genteel qualities. Conversely, if one is of gentle birth, does that mean that one inherently by birth possesses gentle qualities? There's actually another one which I haven't put on here for some reason, but it's truth. And that's the idea that the characters will always keep their words. And we can see that in The Wife of Bath, where in her tale, where the knight promises that he will return after the year in the time in which he is given to find what women most desire. And he keeps his word and he does come back. He could have actually just run away on his horse and never come back, but he did. He kept his word. He's got truth. He has gentlest qualities. You've also got freedom or franchise, which is the generosity of spirit, but franchise is more associated with money. Courtesy is where polite manners and behaviour is shown, and cleanliness is restraining sexual desire. Chaucer uses the wife's tale as a vehicle to subvert these ideas and criticise them. In the 3rd century BC, Liber de Nuptiis translated to the Golden Book of Marriage, which was written by Theophrastus, a Greek anti-feminist. In the 4th century AC, the Epistle against Jovinian quotes Theophrastus. Both of these texts inspired the Canterbury Tales and the wife's character, as well as Romance of the Rose. The Book of Theophrastus discusses the concept of marriage, stating that a wise man should not marry due to the distractions it can cause from his study of philosophy, which is in the Quatrivium. Married women often desire expensive items, while wealthy ones are often considered torture. The book also highlights the importance of finding a wife based on her character, as she may not be suitable for the job. The book also discusses the envious, capricious, irascible, avaricious, and intemperate nature of a wife, who is intent on achieving wealth and lust. The book concludes that a wife is verbose, unreliable, arrogant, and fueled by greed and lust for wealth. And this obviously links to the estate satire, anti-feminist ideas about women. In the prologue, the wife of Bath recounts her 5 marriages, starting at age 12. She's been married to older men, a philanderer and a younger man, Jenkin. Jenkin is physically abusive and a misogynist, and they argue over the Book of Wicked Wives. The wife of Bath's history of multiple marriages challenges the teachings of clerics, as she believes women are morally identical to men, contradicting the prevailing double standard of her era. She would have been seen as a loathly lady, a woman who remarries in order to fulfill her sexual desires. In the tale, a knight who raped a young woman is given a chance to redeem himself by the queen. The queen gives him 12 months and 1 day to find the answer to the question, what do women most desire? The knight asks many women, but none of them answer his question. An old woman promises to give him the answer in exchange for something which he will later request. So the knight shares it with the queen. The old lady wants the knight to marry her, and they marry, but the knight is miserable and treats her poorly. On their wedding night, the old woman reminds him that her looks can be a set, and that he should choose a true and loyal wife or a beautiful young woman. That these simply can't be, a woman can't embody all of these traits, they can only be beautiful or loyal. Women were more vulnerable to violence than men, and the Statute of Treason of 1352 reinforced this notion. Women who were attacked by their husbands were deemed guilty of inverting the natural order, and for this crime a woman would be burned alive. Intrafamilial murders were low, and male prejudice was evident in rape cases. That relates to the feudal system and the divine right of kings. When rape was made a capital felony in 1285, jurors condemned only those in holy orders, allowing them to plead for clergy benefits. Misogynistic monks' writing could lead to the belief that some women deserved to be raped. Rape was a serious crime but had an extremely high acquittal rate due to questions of proof of consent, lack of witnesses, and the reluctance of an all-male jury to pass a death sentence. Victims had little recourse to justice, and suicide was condemned as a means of escaping rape. During the Middle Ages, the Church offered women 2 options: to escape the sin of Eve, becoming celibate, or becoming mothers. Most women, if they did not choose to become nuns, were expected to marry and procreate. The Church saw women as a means of property exchange and regulating sexual activity and controlling carnal desire. All sex outside of marriage was universally considered sinful, and sex within marriage was only acceptable as a means for procreation. It was not meant to be pleasurable. However, obviously the wife subverts these ideas. The Church also provided rules and regulations regarding sex within marriage, such as not permitting sexual activity during feast and fast days, on Sundays, and when the woman was considered unclean, which was during menstruation or pregnancy, or while she was breastfeeding and for 40 days after childbirth. On average, most married couples could legally have sex less than once a week. The Church also provided instructions for marital coitus, such as physical and mental preparation and sufficient foreplay to raise the female's body heat to the correct temperature. Some modern opinions began to surface during the 13th and 14th centuries, with some theologians and canonists allowing sex during pregnancy, claiming that the fetal stimulated sexual desire in the woman. Overall, the Church's emphasis on sex within marriage was a significant aspect of the Middle Ages. The Shipman's tale is a fableau and was originally meant to be told by the wife. A fableau is a brief comic tale in verse, usually scurrilous or scatological or obscene. The style is simple, vigorous, and straightforward. The time is the present, and the settings are real and familiar places. The characters are ordinary sorts, and the plots are realistically motivated tricks and ruses. A fableau often includes a bawdy, coarse tale of lower orders, usually involving crude and scatological humour. The Shipman's tale revolves around a beguiling and handsome young monk named Sir John, who plays a trick on a merchant and his wife. In this story, Sir John befriends himself to a penny-pinching merchant and his wife. The merchant's wife confides in the monk, telling Sir John of her marital problems. Her husband is very controlling and frugal. He doesn't allow his wife to spend money as she fancies. She goes on to say that she's in desperate need of 100 francs so that she can afford new clothes. The monk agrees to secure her with the money she needs so that he can win her affections. He then draws her in for a kiss and protests his desire for her. So John then goes to the merchant and asks for a loan of 100 francs so that he can buy some cattle. Respecting his position as a monk, the merchant agrees to lend him the money. The monk then takes money and gives it to the merchant's wife. In gratitude for what she thinks is the monk's generosity, the merchant's wife sleeps with Sir John. The merchant later asks the monk about the repayment. Sir John tells him that he gave the loan repayment to his wife. When the merchant confronts his wife, she admits to spending the money on clothes and promises her husband sexual favours in return for his forgiveness. So here I've got some quotes on marriage, the wife dominance, women's power in marriage, attitudes towards women, experience in marriage, number of husbands, women's desire for mastery, and the pleasure of marriage. So if you just want to read those, I've got some satire quotes, marriage and authority, biblical interpretation, again, number of husbands, virginity and chastity, women's control in marriage, wifely strategies, women's intelligence, and biblical justification. Again, you can just pause and read these. Some authority quotes, the use of scripture, the Bible stance on marriage, Virgin Mary, relevance of text, women's subjugation, experience versus book knowledge, and old texts. Here we've got some quotes on Chaucer's voice, marriage and authority, women's sovereignty, biblical interpretation, wifely strategies, ecclesiastical critique, religious texts, and authority of the clergy. And we can see Chaucer's voice is really prevalent through the wife herself. The wife could just be the mouthpiece for the Middle Ages, critiquing the church and critiquing the patriarchal control of men over women. Some quotes on the presentation of the church and religion. We've got reproductive commands, ecclesiastical authority, the clergy, Apostle Paul, celibacy, the church's double standards and virginity. The wife as a storyteller and an engaging speaker. She speaks on authority, she entertains the audience, discusses the joys of marriage as she has feminine charms, she controls marriage, she's persuasive, she uses wifely strategies, and she has authority. Thank you for watching this slightly shorter video than the other English ones. I just wanted to run through context and then I just thought you could read the quotes yourself. I think I've categorised them quite easily. And check the link in the description below because I'm going to be attaching my translation of The Wife of Bath. I used this Harvard website translation and I also used the book to translate it. So yeah, feel free to look at that. It is in black and pink. Yeah, I hope this was helpful. Context is a really big thing in The Wife of Bath. It's really important. It's there in everything the wife talks about. There's some form of context behind it. Chaucer really talks about the pressing issues in the Middle Ages using the character of the wife of Bath. She is a mouthpiece. She is a vehicle for social change. So yeah, thank you for watching and good luck.